Jai Mahamaya Ki Jai. We'll go on with chapter 40 of the Devi, the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, retold by Ramesh Menon. Janamajaya asked the great Vyasa, "Can you tell me the origins of the race of the sun on earth, Muni?" Vedavyasa began. Narada told me how Surya Vamsa began in the world. He sat with me once in my ashram and I asked him, "Muni, can you tell me how the house of the son of the family of the seventh Manu began?" Narada said to me, "As everyone knows, Vishnu Narayana laid on the coils of the serpent Ananta under the single and eternal sea of Ekarnava. A golden lotus thrust itself out of Vishnu's navel, and Brahma was born within it. First, Brahma created 7 sons from his mind. Marachi was the first, and then there was Kashyapa Prajapati had 13 wives, all daughters of Daksha. From Kashyapa came the Devas, Dhyatas, Yakshas, Punagas, the beasts and birds of earth. So indeed is creation called Kashyapati. Among the Devas, Surya the sun has the most fame. He is the most lustrous Deva as well. He is called Vivaswan or Vivaswat. Suryadeva's son was called Vivaswat Manu. This Manu had 10 sons himself. Ishvaku was the eldest of them. The others were Nabhaga, Drishta, Saryati, Narishanyanta, Pransu, Nriga, Dista, Karusha, and Vushadra. Ishvaku had 100 sons, and Dikukshi was the elder and wisest of them. Of Manu's other son, Nabhaga had a son named Ambara Isa, who was also a great king of the earth, sage and just and truthful, and a man of immense power. Drishti's son was Darshtaka. Though he was born a Kshatriya, he was hardly a warrior by nature and was always drawn rather towards learning and wisdom than all the callings of the Brahmana. Indeed, he became a Brahmana during his life and had moksha. Saryati had 2 children whose names are legends as the world. Ananta, his son, and Sukanya, his beloved daughter. Saryati gave Sukanya to the blind rishi Chivana to be his wife. Why? By Sukanya's purity and the Ashvin's twins, who are Surya Devi's sons, gave Chivana back his sight. I asked Narada, "O king, how did Satyavati give his daughter to a blind man? She was a beautiful princess and whole in every part." The Muni smiled and said, "King Saryata was like a god upon the earth, had 4,000 wives, but from them all he had was just one daughter, Sukanya. The father and all his wives doted on that princess, and she was like a piece of the moon fallen into the world. Not far from Saryata's capital was a lake as delectable as Mansarava. A god of steps led down to the placid water, on which swans and all kinds of birds and fish played. 5 different kinds of lotuses grew in profusion. All kinds of beautiful trees, ashoka, peepal, and other beautiful fragrant trees grew there, and various vines entwined themselves like lovers around these trees, and all that Mana was swathed in a scent of heaven, from the flowers blooming on those creepers. Peacocks lived in those woods and danced in the rhythm of the seasons, their fans like scintillant miracles in the world. From the branches above, quails lit up the air with snatches of song so enthralling that all the jungle creatures paused in rapture to hear them. In the heart of that forest was a secret grove, a tapavana, where Chivana Maharishi lived in dhyana. The Muni had taken a vow of Menon, and as he sat with his breath perfectly controlled, he neither ate nor drank any more. He meditated upon the ultimate truth, the Parabrahman. So immaculate was the Muni's tapasya, a great anthill grew up around him, and he sat unmoving within it. A Maliki creeper wound itself around the anthill, but still Brigu's son sat on, unmoving, lost within himself in his timeless Atman. One day the king Saryati came to that lake with some of his wives and with his daughter Sukanya and her Sakis. The king and his wives waded into the water to bathe, and Sukanya and her friends began to explore the woods, plucking maliki flowers to make garlands for their hair. Sukanya's anklets chimed delicately in the spring air as she ran here and there, finding jasmine blossom flowers, until suddenly she came to an anthill within which Chivana sat, absorbed in his meditation. The princess went nearer and saw 2 holes in the anthill covered over with jasmine. They shone strangely as if 2 fireflies were trapped inside. Intrigued, Sukanya picked up a sharp branch with thorns and was about to poke those holes when a voice spoke from them. I am a rishi at Dhyan. You have such big eyes. How is it that you cannot see me? Go away, young woman. Leave me in peace. But all the playful princess saw was an anthill before her with 2 shining holes, and she poked them smartly with the thorn branch. Without knowing what she did, Sukanya put out Maharishi Chivana's eyes. His roars of agonies rang through that forest, and Sukanya fled through the trees. Then the strangest thing happened. All the king's men and beasts who were relieving themselves in the woods found that suddenly their bowels and bladders were frozen within them. The king could not ease himself, neither his queens nor anyone else in his party. Saryata was beside himself. He roared, "Who has cast a spell? Let that man be found and punished." One of his trusted counselors said, "Sire, the Maharishi Chivana sits in Dhyan in the woods. I fear somebody from our party has provoked his wrath, and this is his curse." But the king's soldiers said, "None of us have even been near that Muni." The king's women and friends said the same thing. Then Sukanya said, "Father, I saw a big anthill in the forest. There were 2 holes in it through which I could see 2 shining fireflies. I poked them with a sharp stick, and I heard a ghostly voice cry, 'Ah, I'm killed!' I saw the end of the stick was red and wet. I threw it down and ran from there in terror." Saryata realized his daughter must have unwittingly disturbed the rishi Chivana. He had no idea what she had actually done. He hurried on to the anthill from which anguished groans and cries came. The king broke the hardened hill and set Chivana inside, holding his eyes that bled through his palms. Saryati quickly had the Muni's face bound with medicinal herbs to ease his pain. Then he stood before Chivana with folded hands and said, "Holy One, my daughter did not realize what she did. I beg you, Lord, forgive her. Don't curse my child." Chivana knew from his voice how genuinely distressed the king was. He said gently, "Kshatra, I am not angry with your child. Indeed, I have not cursed her at all. But tell me, Kshatra, how will I live? I am old and infirm by my long tapasya, and now your daughter has blinded me. I don't know how I shall survive anymore." Sarati said, "I have a host of servants who will look after you, my lord." But the Muni replied, "I doubt they will care for me for long. Servants are not relations, that they will love a helpless man. No, that is not sufficient atonement for my injury. If you really want to atone, let your daughter, who did this dreadful thing, stay with me and look after my needs." He smiled. "If she does, I think the strange affliction that has seized yourself and your men will vanish gently. Otherwise..." Sarati was shocked. He thought to himself, "My child is young and beautiful, and this Muni is old and ugly, and now he's blind as well. How will Sukanya be happy with this man? How will he satisfy her? Why, young women can hardly remain faithful to their own husbands, even when they are young, handsome, and virile. Surely, if she is married to this blind old man, she will stray. And if she does, she will hardly escape the consequences of her sin." The king was distraught, and he asked Shivanya for some time to consider his proposition, for it had taken him by surprise. Saryati gathered his advisors around him and asked them in despair, "What shall we do? If I do not give my child to the Muni, we shall all die of our strange sickness." Those wise men said, "But how can you even think of your delightful child with that ugly old man?" But suddenly a clear, bright voice spoke to the anguished king. "Father, are you worried for my sake, that I will not be happy? Don't be anxious, my lord. Nothing would make me happier than to be given to the chance to serve the rishis I have blinded so wantonly." Saryati clasped her to him and cried, "But have you seen the rishi, my child? He is old, ugly, and feeble, and, as I have heard, he is very irritable as well. Then he lives here in the midst of this jungle. You have grown up in the palace. How will you bear this life in the wilderness with no servants to attend on you, but serving someone else? Who are this old man's relatives and friends? What wealth does he have that he cannot look after his own child? That he can look after you, my child. Why, to my mind, the choice is clear. It's better that my men and I die here than for me to give you to the rishi to be his bride." She began to speak, but he held up his hand and cried, "Say no more. I will not give you to that old man." But his daughter said, "At least hear me out, father. I will not be unhappy in the forest. I adore the jungle, its sights and sounds, its scents, its untamed creatures, its lakes and streams, its trees and flowers, its birds. I have known all the worldly pleasures any soul needs for a lifetime. Now the forest attracts me more than that palace." She lowered her voice, "And then the Muni has such a sacred aura. I am drawn powerfully to him, father. I will be perfectly happy serving him and learning wisdom at his feet. You need not have a fear. I am not tormented by desire, so many women are. I will be a chaste wife and bring no sin upon myself or any shame to you." The king's minister stood dumbfounded to listen to the princess. She spoke quietly and with dignity, and it was obvious she meant what she said. Saryati hesitated only for another moment. Then he took his child's hand and led her to Chivana. Bowing to the Muni, the king placed his daughter's lithesome hand in the sage's gnarled one. He said, "Holy One, I give this child of mine to you for your seva." The king's priest chanted the Vedas, and the marriage was sanctified. At once the strange constriction that gripped the bowels of the king, Saryati, and his army left them, and they evacuated in huge relief. His heart heavy, Saryati turned to go, but Sukanya called him back. She took off her golden ornaments, gave them to him, and said, "God has blessed me with skin smooth as honey. I have no need for these, nor for the costly silks I am wearing. I mean to wear tree bark and animal hide like the wife of any rishi, and to serve my husband so devoutly that your name, Father, will be legend in the three worlds." Deeply moved, her father had some deerskin and tree bark fetched and gave them to her. But when he saw her clad in those rough garments, tears sprang to his eyes. All his queens wept to see the princess transformed suddenly into a rishi's bride. Saryati could not bear it at all, and he turned back quickly to his city. Narada said, "Sukanya devoted herself to her husband, and she worshipped the sacred fire without fail. It was she, the princess, who now fetched his food for Chavanya. Roots and fruit she foraged from the jungle. It was she who made a fire, drew water from the river, and heated it for the blind Muni's bath, while Sukanya bathed her old husband herself lovingly, put his deerskin on for him, and sat on his asan. Then she would set kusa grass, till, and his kamandala before him, and say, "Everything is ready for your nitya karma." When he had finished his daily worship, she would take his hand and lead him to another seat, where she fed him, often with her own hands, and always cheerfully laughing and chatting with him, for her heart was full of joy. When he finished, she would wash his hands, help him rinse his mouth, and then eat whatever was left over and wash the earthen dishes. Only then did she bathe herself and come and sit next to him. And she would say, "Lord, tell me, what else can I do for you now?" At night, she would massage his body and his legs, and when he slept, she would curl up at his feet and fall asleep exhausted by the day's chores and as happy as she could be. That lovely princess, raised in a palace with 100 maids attending to her every whim, served the old and blind Muni as few women had ever served their husbands. One day, Suryadeva's sons, the Ashvin twins, arrived in the forest. Sukanya was returning to the ashram through the jungle with the water she had drawn from the river where she had also bathed. The brilliant Ashvin saw her and stood transfixed by her beauty. Their auras lit up the trees. One of them said, "Lovely one, who are you? Whose daughter are you? Who is your husband? Do you have one? Why, you are as beautiful as Lakshmi herself." The other Ashwin was not far behind. In ecstasy, he said, "Ah, your feet are as frail as lotus petals. How is it that you go barefoot in the forest? You are certainly a princess. Where are your servants? Why are you carrying this vessel yourself?" His twin took up again, "The deer and birds of this vana are so fortunate that they can see you whenever they like. The earth here is more blessed than Devaloka, that your feet walk upon it. Tell us if you are a princess or an apsara." Shyly, Sukanya said to the two devas, "I am King Saryati's daughter and the wife of Maharishi Chavana, who has his ashram in the forest. Won't you come to my husband's hermitage and bless it?" But the Ashvins cried, "A jewel like you and that old man's wife? Why, you are like a streak of lightning frozen in time. We have never seen anyone like you, and even in Devaloka. You should wear the clothes of heaven around you, your delicate form, not this tree bark and deer hide. You should adorn your body with the ornaments of the gods, so they shine more brightly with your beauty and your beauty with them." "Ah, how exquisite you are," said the other twin, "and folly of follies, fate has given you a blind husband, an old one. God hasn't been kind to you. Why, he hasn't been just. Why we say you should find yourself another husband, and quickly, before the brief season of your youth passes. We offer ourselves to you. Choose one of us, or choose us both. Come away with us to Devaloka, and we will spend sweet hours together in Nandana. This is not the age for a woman like you to be a servant to an old man. This is the time for love. Come away with us. Forget your Muni." Sukanya trembled when she heard this flagrant advances, but she controlled herself and she said levelly, "You are Surya Devi's son, Deva's sons, and they say that there is nothing you do not know in the three worlds. But then you should know that I am a chaste woman. You are great Kassapa Muni's grandsons. How can you speak to me like this? I am a wife, a rishi's wife, besides, and you are asking me to come away with you for pleasure's sake, like some whore? I beg you, Devas, leave me at peace and go away from here. Otherwise, I will curse you." Now her eyes glistened dangerously, and they knew that she was indeed chaste. Those splendid gods smiled at her and said, "Chastity like yours is hardly mortal. We are the physicians of heaven, and there is nothing we cannot do with our powers." Knowing his twin's mind as if they were one, his brother said, smiling brightly, "We have a boon for you, Sukanya. We will make your old husband as radiant and handsome as ourselves. Why, we will restore his sight to him, and he will be as youthful as we are." She stood breathless. The other Ashvin said, "But there is a condition. When we have transformed Chivanya, he will look exactly like us, so you won't be able to tell him or us apart. Then you must choose one of us, three, for your husband." She gasped at that thought and ran back through the Brahma to her Muni, who sat lost in dhyan in his ashram. She burst in on his contemplation and cried, my lord, the Ashvin twins are here in our jungle. Surya's son said that to me that they would make you as young and handsome as themselves, and they would restore your sight to you. But there's a condition. You would look exactly like them, so I would not be able to tell the difference between themselves and you. And then I must choose one of them, one of the three of you, to be my husband. Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.